Rolling down the road, smoking Indo, sipping on gin. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. Hey, today's episode is going to be a little bit different. The title for this episode is Should We Impeach Trump for Violating Articles 1 through 3 of the Constitution, Episode 285, date 12/1925. It's a good question. Let's see what we got going on. But before we do that, let's look right here. Here's a status chat QR code, take you right to the list where all of these live, and you might say, what in the world does impeaching Donald J. Trump have to do with real estate? Well, we're going to get into that just real quickly. So what do you say we look at things as they are? I apologize for being a little bit clickbaitery, but I think I have a point, and the big thing is Donald J. Trump has done something, it's in the news, that I think will hurt Tennessee property values, increase crime and trouble, and personal loss to people's, and overall I think it's just a bad idea. Okay, that's what I think. We're going to find out why. If you'll stick with me, you'll find out why, because how in the world am I going to tie this little bit of clickbait, impeaching Trump, which is, it's something to think about. If we're going to hold one side to following the law, which they don't, we should hold the other side to following the law, which I can't say that they do in all cases, and I need to be fair as best I can, because remember, we talk about people ticks, we talk about the economics of how it affects people and vice versa. We're going to do the same today. So we're going to start right here with this. What am I talking about? About Articles 1 through 3. Well, here we are with our general thing. And I'm not going to read you the question, but the basic question was, we have extended executive powers during an emergency that allows them to do certain things. Now, can we violate the Constitution of the United States for political goals? We're not supposed to, but it says, a sitting United States president cannot simply ignore valid laws outside of a declared national emergency. The Constitution requires them to faithfully execute the laws, meaning they must enforce statutes passed by Congress even if they disagree, though they can challenge the constitutionality of the laws, interpret them, but defying them clearly. A clear legal mandate can lead to constitutional crisis, judicial intervention, and contempt charges and fines and impeachment. The take care clause, we're not going to read that. I will put that over on the YouTube page. I'll grab this little Google result and put it out there on the page. But here's the point. How do we get in this mess with weed in the United States? And that's going to sound political, but it gets back to Barack Hussein Obama. He could not get around the weed laws as written. So what he did was he just told his DOJ not to be enforcing the laws as a priority. He can't tell them not to enforce it. That would be a violation, as you saw, of the take care clause. But he can set priorities for enforcement. However, since the law has not changed, every single weed law, medical or recreational, that's been passed by any state in the United States is unconstitutional. And you say, why, Del, is that even possible? Are you a lawyer? Are you a constitutional scholar? No, but I'm not an idiot and I can read. And what it's a violation of is the supremacy clause that says that if there's ever a conflict between federal law and state law, guess who wins? Yes, the federal government. So the Federal Controlled Substance Act says that weed is prohibited. Marijuana, they spell it differently in the act, and they say marijuana is defined as having THC, Delta 9, and Delta 9 is defined as controlled too. So weed is different than, or marijuana is different than regular cannabis only in the percentage of THC that it has. Hemp is just a convenient name we call weed that doesn't have Delta 9, the final stage of it. But as we know, Delta 8 can be produced in the plant before high heat gets there and converts that from delta or delta A, THCA from delta for that to delta 9. I'm not a chemist either, but I can read. I'm riffing this today. So there we go. We know we can have it. That's the problem, is in the Controlled Substance Act, which is a federal law which no state can violate. But Barack Obama decided that, well, he wanted, I don't know. I personally should not be confused with any of the people on the back of my board there, but I personally have always thought it was just to create confusion and to get some votes, and because people like it. So he told them to make it a low priority, and now we've got weed laws. Now, one of our current justice, Clarence Thomas, a man I actually admire his coolness, his logic, his wisdom, he's certainly a great justice in my book. He said that trying to unsquirrel this would be a real problem because now we've kind of let it go and we'd have to really get at it. Well, let's see what Clarence Thomas had to say. We just did a Google on his comments because they raised a lot of eyebrows, and AI says, and they point out this response right here. Clarence Thomas has not made any comments more recent than June of 2021. Statement regarding the enforceability of Federal Controlled Substance Act, CSA, as it pertains to state legal marijuana. That's not national legal, state legal marijuana. In a statement, he argued that the federal government's approach is an episodic, half in, half out regime that may no longer be necessary or proper. And they cite the case. All right, now if we get down here, one of his biggest issues was it's just been sloppy for a long time, and it makes it very difficult to pass it as a law, to say that it hasn't been, that enforcement hasn't been abandoned long enough, or that states' rights do not exist. The federal government's controlled substance would still be on the books. Now, the federal government does have the ability to rewrite the law. Congress would do that. They should do it. I would think they would have to do that. But there is a process. If they can prove scientifically that it is safe to reschedule, they can do that. That it no longer makes the definition of what we want to call that. It no longer meets the definition of a Schedule 1 drug. The FDA can go through rulemaking to do it, but they actually have to then justify it. The Congress can just do whatever it wants. It doesn't necessarily have to have justification because it's not written into the law that way. It just says the law says what the law says. Now let's go back and look at this again. Here we go. Federalism concern. This is where they were talking about where does the state rights begin and the federal rights end. Federalism concern. He suggested the federal government's inconsistent stance strains between principles of federalism if the government is willing to allow states to act as laboratories like California and Colorado for social and economic experiments. It may no longer have the constitutional authority to interfere with their core police powers to define criminal law, in which case it says you may have just simply blown it. All right, let me see if I got one down here. We had another case we want to look at. U.S. marijuana ban may no longer be necessary. This is on it. Clarence Thomas says the federal laws against marijuana may not be necessary, but there is one here. Let's see where it is. Right here, 10th Circuit. All right, where is this? That's what, Colorado, someplace out there? Where's that? 9th is all the way to the west. 10th Circuit, thanks but no thanks on Justice Thomas's pot statement. So we can't even get along with this. So previously, Thomas cast doubt on Congress's ability to regulate cannabis within the states by pointing to the federal government's tolerance and widespread retail and medical marijuana legalization. This is not federal legalization. This is state legalization, despite continued federal status as an illegal substance. Standing, and there's another case here, Denver dispensary seized on Thomas's statements its own fight with the Internal Revenue Service, arguing the IRS's quest for business records was illegitimate because the government's receding interest in enforcing marijuana prohibitions against the states. But on Friday, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit decided the statement from a single Supreme Court justice did not outweigh the Supreme Court's own precedent, specifically a 2005 case endorsing federal crackdowns in states with legal medical marijuana. And medical marijuana is a loose term. Now, the states would have more latitude under the state's laws than they would under the federal law because we have a process with the FDA where they have rulemaking and they have to submit their justification. It's like you can have a bunch of people who just want their weed say, oh, yeah, it helps my headaches. Oh, yeah, it helps my overeating. Oh, yes, it helps my undereating. It helps my depression, whatever. That doesn't necessarily make convincing medical scientific proof. So we'll go take a look at that in a little bit. So maybe that's what Trump's really trying to do, is to force Congress to get off their butts. I'm sorry, their tuchus. I can't probably say butt on TV. Get off their tails and address this. Now, only Congress can change the Scheduled Drug Act. He can't. Now, being the executive branch, the way the Constitution works, if the law of the land said we are going to give control over controlled substances directly to the FDA's control under the executive branch, yeah, then he can do it by changing the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR. All right, well, let's take a look to see if such law does exist. Because like I say, if it's written into the law, no rule can do what the law doesn't allow it to do. So do we have a law that then authorizes the FDA to ignore the Scheduled Drug Act or to change it on their list? Let's see if they do. How about looking right here? 21 U.S.C. Section 8:11, authority and criteria for classification of the substances. Now, it'll go through this. A says rules and regulation in general for holding a hearing. It says the AG will do it. It says number 1 says they can add to a schedule or transfer between such schedules of any drug or any other substance. If he finds that such drug or other substance has a potential for abuse, they can move it up. Make with respect to such drug or other substance finding prescribed section of 812 of this title if the drug is to be placed. Number 2 is to remove a drug from one schedule. If he finds it doesn't meet that schedule, you have to put it in another schedule where it fits. They talk about the evaluation, the process. You have to have science and actual data. There's a list right here. It says factors determining control or removal from such schedule, because we might find something is more dangerous than we thought it was and move it up. We might find something is less addictive or whatever. It's not causing mental breakdowns like weed does. Is actual relative potential for abuse, scientific evidence of pharmacological effect, if known. Does it have any medical value? Schedule 1 does not. The state of current scientific knowledge regarding the drug or other substance. I saw a study released this week when this was announced. Trump was thinking about doing it, that said that no, cowboy, we don't see any real evidence that weed affects pain because it doesn't affect the opiate receptors, and it doesn't do for depression. Those are two of the big claims. We saw a study that said that wasn't true. So it's certainly not definitive. The history or current pattern of abuse, the scope and duration and significance of abuse. We know that there are about 6% of people at any given time have a cannabis use disorder. The psychic or psychological dependence on the drug itself. We go back to these things. Here we have them. We have whether or not the substance is an immediate precursor of a substance already controlled under this chapter, which means could we put like THCA on the list because it is just one bond away from being THC9. I think that's what that means. So Trump may be able to, through a due process of the changing of the rules or regulations, what we call it at the national level, he could change that, but it had to have public input and all that kind of stuff. He can't just do it with, as Obama said, a stroke of the pen. Can't do it. That's not how it works. And this is not an emergency, so he can't use emergency powers to do it. Now, here's the problem with real estate. This is your homework. I don't want you to think I'm being political. I'm being economical here. I'm talking about the people tax. And it also affects quality of life. Go do your research and don't go to Mary Jane's and the industry sites. Go to news sites. Look at what Oklahoma did. Oklahoma thought, well, we have all that crime in California, and they made the legal weed, but they set the barrier so high that between the water bills and the water permits and the land permit and the erosion and all that kind of stuff, they made it where it was extremely difficult to grow weed legally, according to their own state laws. They're not going to deregulate it, take it out of the Controlled Substance Act entirely, and just let you grow it like a tomato or a squash or a zucchini or something in your own garden. Heckers, you would put them out of business, them and the corner boys too, because you could just, in the space of a small closet, you could put one little grow light and grow your little ruderalis clip in there and have all the weeds you could possibly use for a year. And it doesn't take long to grow. And so what we saw in California is that they made it so tough, in California being such a big state, we just had illegal growers come right across into the United States, open border, and set up grow ops. By the time they set them up in the Golden Triangle in the mountains, they're there, they grow it, they leave an environmental mess, a total nightmare, and they sell it there. And we saw Gavin Newsom earlier this year with one of his legal grows that were supposed to pay taxes. The guy had paid taxes once and gave like $10,000 to Gavin Newsom. And in fact, ICE came in there, raided it, and found out they were just almost entirely peopled with illegals, and some of them even minors brought across the border, forced to work in the grow-up. So it didn't make things better; it made things worse. And I'll go into all. I could spend a month on this, but I'm not. I'm just saying it didn't work out like they planned. Got it? It just didn't work out like they planned because there's still profit motive in it. As long as there's a profit motive in it, they're going to. I mean, why is somebody going to spend really high money for dispensary drug when they can get it from their corner boy for a lot less? Well, they're probably not going to do that, are they? And even they've caught dispensaries violating the law. It's just like wild, wild west. Well, Oklahoma saw that and said, well, it's kind of like socialism. They always say, well, it wasn't done right. Well, Oklahoma's a fairly red state. Well, Oklahoma took the tack, well, let's just make it where it's only a couple $100 to get you a grow permit, and you can grow you a permit and do your stuff. And they still got flooded. In fact, they pulled a lot because the cost was cheaper in Oklahoma. They pulled a lot of that criminal traffic from California to Oklahoma, and they got a mess. The only way we fix the illicit weed product, which is a lot of it is tainted with, used to be tainted with PCP back in the old days. I would say good old days, but they weren't good. Now it's being topped with fentanyl to get a different high off of it. And it's killing people, not the weed, but the fentanyl. But the high concentration stuff is causing trouble. We'll get to that just after this little tab. All right, so we're going to look at this next one is just how federal impeachment works. We've seen them make up stuff and come at him before. What would they do if they actually have a legitimate, undeniable violation of the Powers Act? It just tells you how to do it. All right, if found guilty, blah, 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 House has to do it. Who controls the House? They're not apt to do it. And since it really boils down to, I don't know if Trump's playing a game with them, if he's doing this so that he can force Congress to actually produce some fruits in the bag, so that they actually do something instead of just using it as a poll driver. The Democrats have done that. I'm not bashing them, but they'll tell people, well, look, you vote for us, we'll straighten out weed. But they're not going to do that, because if they ever did, then you wouldn't have the motivation to vote for them the next time they needed your vote. So they're not going to do it. And also, and if Trump were to do this himself by rulemaking, We know that there was already one started like in 24, but it stalled out and stopped, and we don't really know why it stopped. Now, what Trump's executive order does, it doesn't directly say he has rescheduled it by fiat. What it says that he's ordering them to get back on the stick. Now, the problem is, why did it stop? Was it because the FDA people, the staffing changed, or is it probably the same reason why Obama didn't do it? Because Obama certainly could have done it, right? If Trump can do it, why didn't Obama do it when he was doing his little bit? Take some of the confusion out of it. He could have just simply descheduled if he wanted to, if it's possible to do it by rulemaking. The hitch seems to be, as we've already covered, it has to scientifically have medical value, and it doesn't seem to have any. And it has to be not subject to easy abuse, which it doesn't seem to do that either. Now we have iatrogenic problems with this, such as, say it was good for depression, it still causes lung cancer, it still causes obstructive pulmonary disease, it still causes schizophrenia, aggravates schizophrenia, it aggravates or causes psychosis. There's a lot of bad stuff beyond just messing your lungs up and your heart up. It also can have some ties, research is still working on it, maybe to age-related, maybe not necessarily age-related, but shows up later in life, the Alzheimer's type symptoms. You know, they're looking at it. There was one study, I think it was, that said it might be good for Parkinson's, but it looks like it does more damage than it does good. So let's look at whether or not it can meet that. We do know it causes lung damage. That's not good. We do know that it has a high potential to be abused. That's good. It increases crime and violence, and we know it does that. How does it do some of this stuff? Let's look over here. How about JAMA? JAMA, Yeller Hammer. JAMA Psychiatry, the convergence of cannabis and psychosis on the dopamine system. Well, you can read this. We can read the abstract. Despite evidence that individuals with cannabis use disorder are at elevated risk of psychosis, at the neurotransmitter dopamine has a role to play in it. So they're trying to say, yeah, it does do that, and we know that it causes increased psychosis. Here's one. We've got the medical information does not prove benefit. It only proves, at some controversy, the level of damage weed produces. Let's check another one out. Here's one, National Library of Medicine. All right, what this one is about, high potency cannabis and the risk of psychosis. Again, like I was talking to you, the worst that 2 and 4% can do to you, because you can't really smoke too much of it, and it wasn't that much around. Perhaps the worst that we suffered back in the day was, if you smoke it 40 years ago, it'll make your hair fall out and turn white. Of course, that was a real long time ago, and the statutes of limitations has fallen away. So I'm not a prude, but the stuff just wasn't the same stuff we have today, and it wasn't monkeyed around, and we had some of that protective stuff. I don't have your study pulled up, but it is there out there. And it just says, the background, people who use cannabis have an increased risk of psychosis, an effect attributed to the active ingredient Delta-9. There has recently been concern over an increase in the concentration of Delta-9 in the weed. And what we see is the higher the concentration, the greater the brain damage it causes. Now we know, you can Google this, THC damages the hippocampus. Some of it is temporary, transient, like your impairment can be transitory for a period of time, and when you straighten up, it goes away. Unless you do a lot of it, then it may start taking a month or so to go away before you get clean of it. But if it's high enough, smoked long enough, it does cause damage, not just respiratory or heart damage, or to the brain itself. And it affects your mind. It increases psychosis. We know that. So it's hard to say that if it affects nausea, there's enough medical benefit of it. to warrant the increased psychosis that in the people that will be likely be a public safety hazard and a burden on society. Here's another one. Who is this from? Behind the Smoke, unmasking the link between cannabis and schizophrenia. There's all kinds of evidence out there. And I think it's too much to be on one man, whether it be a Fauci type person or a president or whatever. It's a congressional issue and Congress needs to deal with it. So yeah, I did clickbait you a little bit with impeaching Trump. You know, here's his lovely picture. That's AI, by the way. He's not actually smoking a spliff there. It's just something I pulled off somebody's artwork. So yes, do we need more schizophrenia? Do we need more fractured brains? Do we need more violence? I have seen studies in the past that says that particularly young males have 6 times the risk of engaging in violence if they are regular users of weed. So do we really want to bring this up? Especially these modified versions, these GMO versions that have been made so strong at the cost of breeding out the cannabinoids, which may have had a protective effect on his brains. On old hippie type people, it may have helped them. This is just a different animal. And next week is Christmas, so you probably won't see us till after the new year. And I will tell you, start on your taxes early. Okay? Start on your taxes early. That's it for today. I hope I picked up some new viewers. You can send me some hate comments down below and tell me I'm an idiot and I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, this kind of stuff, look at how weed specifically in each of those states, look at the violence, look at the number of unreported crimes you see in areas like Charlotte, North Carolina, a blue city that's loose with the crime. You see that the way they fix the crime rates, they just don't arrest people. They don't keep them in jail. And we saw a young lady pay an ultimate price for a political justice system that was not fair to her. And we can't just say the information is hard to come by. We know what it does, and it's just an issue for Congress and the American people to vote for. If we say we don't want it, let's keep it illegal. If we say we want to make it legal, let's make it all the way legal so we take the drug runners' profits away. Can we do that? Could we do that? But I don't think anybody running for Congress is going to vote for something that potentially cuts into some campaign money on either side. I'm just being political. I'm just telling you. But yeah, it doesn't help people's brains. It fractures the brain, and we need to really know what's going on, especially with Tennessee. It hurts property values. Every state that's done it, go check, look at the crime rates, and look for the news articles on how it didn't meet their expectation for revenues, and it brought in more crime, more human trafficking. And the legal ops were outnumbered by the illegal ops, and there's no reason why somebody's going to pay good government taxes on theirs if they can get it for free. And law enforcement can't prove for a fact that this is actually legal weed or not legal weed. So we've got it's just a mess. So that's it. See you next year.